Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, FD465.tv. And guys, the recent announcement that the US federal debt has just hit $38 trillion cannot go unchecked. We've got to say something about this because this is crazy, especially if you are going to wait and watch the whole video and learn how this has happened and what's coming next. Some of what's coming next is actually scary, but if you're American, you'll probably be thinking, we've never defaulted on our debts, and this is no different. Believe me, this is different, it feels different, it smells different, and the world now, there are some moving parts that will actually accelerate this process, and things are about to go crazy. But before I jump into this video, guys, please know that I am not a financial advisor. If you do require financial advice, please approach someone who is actually trained to give you financial advice. The information contained in this video is just for educational as well as entertainment purposes. That said, guys, please consider subscribing to our channel. We are one of the few channels who actually bring you non-conventional content that you may not find anywhere else. But having said that, I don't think this issue of the American debt hitting 38 trillion hasn't been covered anywhere else. I think it's been covered, but we are going to give you a different take and give you some permutations that you got to consider because things are about to go crazy. The Americans are in debt. Are they about to get broke? That's what we want to jump in. So let's start with the numbers then. General federal debt hitting $38 trillion. The total is just crossed 38 trillion, like I said. Latest official daily print, Treasury debt to the penny, 37.98 on the 17th of October 2025. Closest daily figure available. I mean, there is a running clock, so that clock might be well over 38 trillion. But the debt clock itself is a real-time display for calculations. The Treasury's daily total are the gold standard. The debt clock is here for live viewing. That's why I'm using it as a graphic here. Where did things start to look exponential? Because that's what's causing the issue now. Things are getting exponential. Well, think of three clear inflection zones. We're talking of 2008 to 2012 with the great financial crisis and the aftermath. Things start to steepen as automatic stabilizers and stimulus hit. Long-run Fred series shows the curve's grade increasing markedly from 2008 onward. And the next part was the 2020 to 2021. That was the COVID shock. This was a step change up from emergent spending, and things got even crazier. Next is the mid-2023 onward, where post-debt ceiling issuance surged and higher interest, because interest rates started going crazy because of the spending that happened during COVID. You have to take that hit out of the market. So while that was dealing with inflation, it was also increasing the costs on what the American public can pay in interest to their creditors. And the gross debt jumped by 1 trillion in just 3 months in 2023. And that's an unprecedented non-pandemic pace, signaling the start of the present fast lane. So how fast is the debt rising right now? Well, we can triangulate three speeds from official points or prints. We're talking of daily, monthly, and yearly. The 14-day pace, for example, from 3rd of October to 17th of October 2025, is talking of a run from 37.85 trillion to 37.97 trillion, which is an increase of 124.6 billion or 8.9 billion per day being added to the debt, which is approximately 270 billion per month. That's like a decent sized European economy's GDP. We're talking of the likes of Bulgaria and stuff. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but that's crazy. 270 billion per month being added to the federal debt. If you look at the 1 month pace, talking of August, September monthly tallies, it's approximately 370 billion per month. Latest monthly series, which is equivalent to 12.3 billion per day. So if you're looking at it at a monthly scale, it's about 12.3 billion per day just in interest. And that money, if it was being dumped into healthcare, could do very good damage, could improve people's lives, not the yo-yo game they're playing at the moment. And if we extend that to a 12-month pace from September 24 to September 25, 2.18 trillion has been added per year, or the equivalent of $6 billion per day. So this snapshot captures the recent extreme burst from 1 trillion from August to October. So 1 trillion added between August and October, which implies an even faster short bursts of approximately 16 to 17 billion per day. But that speed tends to ebb and flow with cash management and bill issue. When will the next trillion be added from 38 trillion to 39 trillion, for example? Well, let's use the three empirical run rates that we've just been looking at. If we start with the first best case, best as in best, the increase or the damage being caused here. If we use the fastest, which is $16 billion per day, you're talking of 63 days to add another trillion. That's like 2 months, but I think it could be worse than that. So that would take us just before Christmas. That would be a good present for the American people, isn't it? 24 billion on Christmas Eve. The base case, which is kind of the average or the middle, you're talking about $12 billion per day, and that's a 1 month pace, approximately 83 days to reach another trillion, which would take us to the 14th of January 2026. And if you use the conservative case, which is $6 billion per day, which comes from the 12-month pace, you're talking of 167 days, that will be around the 8th of April 2026. Now, I think, this is my own opinion, I think the worst case scenario, which is the first best, at $16 billion per day, I think that will be halved, which means it's actually going to be $16 billion in 30 days or $32 billion in 30 days. That could happen, guys. I think that could happen, and that would that will mean by the end of November we'll have another $1 trillion added to the American federal debt. So the bottom line for by December this year, which is December 2025, is possible but not assured. Hitting $39 trillion by late December would require the very fast recent best persist. The more stable base points to early to mid-January 26. What about 2026 and the next 5 to 10 years? Oh, will it go that far? Maybe the US economy will be dead by then. Just say, I know our American friends will not buy into this. Why? Because America has never failed to pay its debts. But if the rest of the world starts scaling back on using the US dollar, the greenback, as most people call it, as a reserve currency, all this becomes meaningless. So 10-year total increase, the national debt rising by approximately 23.9 trillion over 10 years. That's quite possible. Yeah, you're talking of policy neutral baseline, excluding extra cost, tax cuts are extended. That's roughly 2.4 trillion per year on average. I think we'll be doing a lot more than this per year. And if we're using that 2.4 trillion per year, that's an increase of about $6.5 billion per day. And it tends to accelerate later in the decade. Interest costs explode. We're talking of an estimate of 13.8 trillion in net interest outlays, financial year 2026 to 2035, and a key driver of faster borrowing later, that interest that is. So putting that into the time to a trillion lens, the 2026 baseline of 6.5 to 7 billion per day, a trillion every 145 days to 155 days, which is approximately 5 months. The next 5 years to 2030, at least 2.3 to 2.6 trillion added per year, and total gross debt could add approximately 11 to 13 trillion in 10 years time. So if we're at 38 in 10 years time, we'll be sitting at 49, 50 trillion. That's crazy. Again, backloaded as interests, benefits, outlays rise. And the next 10 years to 2035, you're talking of 24 trillion more in the baseline before policy changes. So that is from 38 trillion now towards 62 trillion gross by 2035 if laws stayed unchanged. So if everything stayed unchanged and they just keep spending 62 trillion by 2035, yeah, that's crazy. Directionally consistent with the every 5 months cadence accelerating over time. The calculations we're using, these guys, they include the calculations we're getting from the debt clock. I'll leave a link in the comment section. Those calculations also use the Treasury's debt to the penny and monthly data sets. Long run exponential look is visible on the Fred chart. Policy and macro shocks line up with the kings, talking of 2008, 2020, and post 2023 issuance. Conservative estimates for the next 10 years, you're talking of from 2025 to 2034. Conservatively, you're extending this same 1 trillion every 5 months pace. You're talking of 12 trillion added every 5 years. So over 10 years, you're talking of $24 trillion added, starting from 36 trillion, which is $2 trillion ago. By 2034, the debt will be 60 trillion. And here's a quick rundown of my approximations. 2025, 38 to 39 trillion. End of 2026, 41 trillion. End of 27, 43 to 44 trillion. 28, 45 to 46 trillion. End of 29, 47 to 48 trillion. End of 2030, 49 to 50. But I think these numbers will change because it's 2 to 3 trillion now. It's going to be maybe double that per year. The craziness going on over the, across the pond. And by the time we reach to 2034, you're probably looking at 58 to 60 trillion in debt. So realistic constraint scenario here, likely ceiling in my view. When are things going to break? That's what I'm calling a realistic constraint scenario. So historically, once net interest outlays consume approximately 25% of federal revenue, fiscal consolidation or market stress forces a slowdown. At current trends, that level is between 1.3 to 1.5 trillion in interest. If this is reached, which I think will happen between 27 to 2028, that will be the breaking point. So we are not far off from the US economy actually failing catastrophically. That likely marks the real-world inflection point where acceleration stops and either stabilization or crisis dynamics appear. So someone is going to step in and actually say enough is enough, we're going to stop this, but then you've got to break a lot of things for that to happen, put some stabilizers. Or you just let crisis take over and the crisis dynamics appear, and when crisis takes control, everything is out of the people's hands. So if that is the case, this is crazy. If we leave it until a crisis takes place, this is what will happen. So if you're seeing from 24 to 2025, there's been approximately $2.5 trillion added, which is at 4 months intervals every trillion, and that's using the baseline acceleration. 2025, are we going to see 5 trillion, which will take us from 38.5 trillion to 43.5 trillion? That is if we can add another 2-3 trillion between now and the end of the year. I'm not sure about that, but that will be the rapid phase. And 2026, if the federal debt increases increases by 7 trillion, you're talking of crazy things coming. You're talking of an increase from 43.5 to 50.5 trillion. And the interval per trillion, if that drops to 1.5 to add another trillion every time, then you know fiscal stress is rising. And there might not be no going back. You might not be able to count this down. It will not cool down. What's waiting to happen is for someone to come in and put stabilizers, or for the crisis to take hold. And when that happens, that's your inflection point. Things are heading for disaster. Then 27, if during the financial year 27, if the debt increases at a rate of 1.2 months, that would be crazy. Okay? That would be crazy. That's the unsustainable zone. You're talking of debt ranging from 50 trillion to 60 trillion. That would be unsustainable. And that's the unsustainable zone. And 2028, that financial year, if the debt increases by 11 trillion plus, which means it will be rising from around 59.5 trillion to 70.5 trillion, that will mean the American federal debt is increasing by 1 trillion per month. How far off are we? If interest rates start rising because of the issues around international trade, 1 trillion per month, I can't see that being an overstatement. I think it's quite possible. It's just down to whether the current administration can see that far. I doubt they do see that. Their foresight is only determined by what's going on in Donald Trump's head. So 1 trillion per month throughout 2028, adding approximately 11 trillion or more, that's near systemic limits. I think that's where things will break. So you got to look at it like this. The way I'm looking at it, look at the rates for the intervals at which $1 trillion is added to the federal debt in the US. If it gets to anywhere close to 1.5 months to 1 month, that's it. That's it. The whole world is now a passenger. The American economy and the American authorities and we have the Federal Reserve, they're all passengers now, unless someone actually steps in and say, that's it, we're going to stop this. Because this is not sustainable. We are very close. If we standardize the trillion per every 2 months, you know the 1 to 1.5 months is not far off. So we are not far off that, guys. This is quite real. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts as far as the American debt is concerned, which I think is going to affect everybody, including those who did not vote in US election, unless our respective governments take steps to protect us from what's about to happen in the States. This is not scaremongering. These are just my own thoughts based on the data and the trend where things are going at the moment. It's not looking pretty. Some world powers, they're talking the likes of China, Russia, and most of the BRIC countries, and some in Europe, they're already seeing it. The Americans don't actually know who sustains their economy. They think they sustain their economy on their own, but what they don't realize is they export most of their inflation. They don't know that, but things are about to change. And if they do change, at what speed and at what cost? That's what we're going to spend the next few months watching, and we may just do another video, guys, to provide you an update. Until the next one, guys, FD for 65.tv signing out for now. Bye.